Good evening, everybody. Welcome to tonight's edition of Shop Talk, hosted by the Triangle Area SQL Server Users Group. Welcome to Shop Talk. It's the first one we've done in a little bit because I was gone 2 weeks ago, and we only do it every 2 weeks. So check out the math on that one. So we have with us two esteemed co-hosts. Directly to my right, longitudinal left, is Mala. How you doing, Mala?
Good evening, everyone. Pleased to be here.
And directly to my southeaster, which
Man,
is sort of like a nor'easter, but kind of more with an accent, is Mike. How you doing, Mike?
doing very well. Hello, everybody.
So Mike is back from vacation, which means his microphone is still kind of in wake up mode. It's trying to get back into the groove, but that's okay. Quick ground rules of Shop Talk. We have ground rules. Nobody follows them, so it's okay. Everything's fine. But the idea of Shop Talk is every couple of weeks we get together. It's a Monday evening, East Coast time. It's after work, kicking back, talk a little bit of shop, talk a little bit about technical topics. We've got a few items on the agenda. Also, if you have any questions, this is originally supposed to be kind of a Q&A style of show, and it remains a Q&A style show, regardless of what my critics may say. So if you have any questions, drop them in chat, and we'll happily talk about them. Otherwise, it will be an A&A show, which is answers and answers. Anders and answers. So A&A, Anders and answers. Welcome, Anders. Always following the rules. I absolutely believe that. Have no doubt about it in my mind. So we have a few topics for tonight. And I'm going to share my screen and show off the first of those topics, and that is SQL Saturday Raleigh. We have our schedule out as of maybe like 2 hours ago. So you can get access to our schedule at the SQLSaturday.com website. On that website, you will see this fancy, spiffy updated schedule. We have 4 rooms. We have not given them names or numbers just yet. That will come. It's forthcoming. But in each room, not surprising, you will have one speaker who will be giving one session at one time. And so we have a grid. And I'm explaining this as though nobody has ever seen a grid before with a schedule on it. I'm doing it mostly on purpose, but mostly because we're trying to get Mike sometimes so that he can fix all of his issues. That's how we roll here on Shop Talk, where we're doing it live, people. Nonetheless, try to do our best to fit up the schedule a little and make sure that we've got different sessions at different times, different tracks going, so that way we don't pack all like the Fabric sessions all at once or the T-SQL development sessions all at once. So you're going to see a good mixture of sessions from 24 really good speakers. And incidentally, there is one that is near the end, which this one on SQL Server 25, an enterprise AI ready database platform. I'm probably not going to deliver this one. There will probably be another speaker, but I'm just here for the moment. Yes, vamping. I absolutely do a lot of vamping. That is 100% correct, Enhanced QC. That is basically the entirety of Shop Talk is honestly a long vamping session from myself, punctuated with people in chat derailing me. So we kind of do that. Nonetheless, if you are interested in registering, now that we have our speakers list out, you cannot submit to speak again, but you can register, and registration is free. Now there is an optional cost for lunch. That cost for lunch comes to us, and well, we buy lunch with it. So it kind of works out that way. There is a pre-con from Brent Ozar, faster, cheaper cloud databases. You can still sign up for that. There are tickets available. So I can drop a link in here. It is $199 plus 0 other payment options. So you're just going to have to pay. And because there are no other options, you are going to have to pay. So just go ahead and go register and pay right now. The event itself is at Duke Health, 14 Moore Drive. So check that out. Don't check it out during the day or anything because they do have security people there, and it would just be awkward. So don't make Mike's life difficult. Just just show up on the SQL Saturday or maybe the day before because you had no other option but to pay for the pre-con. And then we'll have a nice pre-con and then a great SQL Saturday, and everything will be fine. By the way, thank you to our global sponsor, Microsoft and AMD, who have combined to provide me this fidget toy. So I got one of those at Richmond this past Saturday, and I'm going to put it down because it actually does make some loud noises when I'm fussing with it, and therefore I don't want to have too much of that on stream. Even though the microphone will probably block out a lot of it, it won't block out 100%. And so I, out of respect for my audience, all 6 of you, have decided I will put that thing down and instead fuss about with something that is a lot quieter. So you got that going for you. Silver sponsor, Redgate Simple Talk. Check out Simple Talk. They're a silver sponsor, so I'm going to say check them out, but I'm not going to give them all the same level of what our global sponsor gets. So there are sponsorship plans available in case you work for a company that may want to sponsor SQL Saturday. Come check it out. Anders will be holding a hallway track all by himself. I could see that. There are some good hallway areas to have that kind of a conversation as well. So that's yet another reason for you to sign up for SQL Saturday. Not only is it a free event, unless you pay for lunch, in which case I guess it's technically a paid event, but still, come on. But also, you can get harangued by Anders for 8 hours when you just really just wanted to go to the bathroom. All right. The call for speakers has already closed. So again, no more speakers. We have all the speakers that we need, and maybe all the speakers that we want, but all the speakers that we need definitely. So here's the sponsorship plan in case you wanted to send money. Please only send money if you are a company. Don't now that you have to already buy the pre-con, I'm not saying you also have to be a gold sponsor. But if you have a gold sponsor who wants to give us money to run the event, I'm okay with that. I will accept that. All right, soliloquy over. Let's talk about our second topic. I was going to say first real topic, except that was a real topic. SQL Saturday Raleigh is a real topic, and Richmond was this past weekend. It was a nice event up in, obviously, Richmond, Glen Allen, Virginia. So near enough that we can get up there, get back, not too much of a difficulty. So kind of got an idea of what it feels like to have a small to moderate sized event in the southeastern region. We're going to have a very similar event, I believe. So if you were up at Richmond, you'll kind of have a feeling for what it'll be like. Several tracks, things are nice. Hopefully things go smoothly. Some people win some stuff. Everyone goes home happy, except for the people who don't. But it turns out I'm actually not responsible for happiness. That's not in the rules, so I don't have to care. I will care to a small extent, but not to the fullest extent possible. All right, now let's talk about something else. Sorry, I had to drag that out and make it look awkward. Missed Richmond for the first time in years. It was a pretty good event. Very similar to last year's event, same location, and actually, big news. Wayne Sheffield is stepping down from helping run the SQL Saturday in Richmond. So he's been doing it for a long time, since 2010. So 15 plus years helping run SQL Saturdays in the area. Been a great pillar of the community, and he had a very nice card that several of us signed. So best of luck to Wayne as he continues doing his thing, but maybe without the stress of having to run a SQL Saturday or a user group along the way. So
I haven't seen him in years. Hope everything is going well, and it's for a good reason he's stepping away.
yeah, I mean, he's just getting to the point where life is near retirement and ready to
Totally
hand
get
that
it.
off.
Yeah.
So,
Good folks, man. Yeah.
yeah, and Jamie and AZ are going to do a good job. They've already been they've already been doing a lot in SQL Saturday Richmond for the past few years. So, and I know they help run Jamie definitely helps run the user group. So life is okay. Life is doing fine. Retirement. What language is that? Swedish? Well, it's where you get those extra tires. You drive down to the used tire shop and you say, "Man, my tires are all worn out. I need some retires." And then they put the tires on, so that's retirement. So Wayne is going out; he has to get new tires on his car. All right.
Right.
Next up, Fabric, March 2025 feature summary. So this is from Patrick LeBlanc, Mr. Other Guy in a Cube. And basically there's a lot going on. If you can see the scroll bar is tiny, the little indicator. There is a lot that has happened in Fabric, as you would expect, given that there was an entire conference dedicated to Microsoft Fabric called FabCon. And FabCon was in Las Vegas, so this was the US version. There were several big announcements. And I want to see if the big Copilot announcement is in here. I don't think so. So this isn't even everything. This is just a bunch of stuff that they've been releasing. But one of the biggest announcements that came out of FabCon was previously, in order to use Fabric Copilot, you needed an F64 SKU. So F64 SKUs run somewhere around $8,000 to $9,000 US dollars per month. And you can get it down to about $5,000 US dollars per month if you pre-allocate, if you prepay, get a reserved instance. So that is fine. It works well enough, but it's also a little bit expensive. And there have been a lot of people complaining, saying, "Hey, my company doesn't need an F64. We don't run that many queries. It's not that big of a data set, but I really want to get Copilot. So what can you do for me?" And after a lot of haranguing, Microsoft people said, "Oh, okay, fine. Everybody gets Copilot. Your F2, you can use Copilot. You don't need a 64 anymore." So big announcement. People are very happy. I'm sitting kind of in the corner laughing to myself just a little bit, because this is a monkey's paw gift. This is, you wished on the monkey's paw and said, "I would like any SKU to have Copilot." And the monkey finger went down because you used up one of your wishes, and you got every SKU in Fabric gets Copilot. Now, quick reality check: if you have used Fabric Copilot on an F64, you might have found out you can use up the entire capacity of an F64 just by goofing around in Copilot for a bit. A few people goofing around in Copilot for a while, or when I say goofing around, a few people actively using Copilot and Fabric can consume the entirety of that F64 capacity. Now, yeah, you have Copilot on an F2. Okay, how much are you going to be able to do with that? At what point are you going to get throttled because, hey, you used up both of your queries today in F2? And I think people haven't so much thought about that. They've thought about the immediate effect of, "Oh, cool, I can use this in my F8 or my F16. And it's true. To the extent that you have a very light workload, but that you do want that Copilot capacity, it's good to be there. But it's also not a panacea. It's not going to act like on your F64. And even with the F64, you may need to bump it up to a 96 or a 128 if you're really hitting Copilot hard. Kevin, don't you understand the marketing team? They work so hard on that AI slideshow. Yeah, I guess I shouldn't give them grief that a shell script replaced them. So, and I mean, this is even without me knocking Copilot at all. I have my opinions on most generative AI platforms and concepts. I'm very openly stated that I'm not the biggest fan of generative AI for most purposes. I don't see killer apps for generative AI. I see novelties, I see toys, I see the occasional helper. I don't see anybody who has created an application that, yeah, I will pay $20 a month for this application. There are people who will pay like, oh, I'll pay for ChatGPT. There are some people who will do that, but that I don't consider that a business application in the same sense. This isn't. This is GitHub Copilot is probably the closest thing, and even that doesn't have an enormous amount of revenue. So I will readily admit, hey, I am not the biggest fan of generative AI as a concept. I think it is sucking the oxygen out of the room for other forms of AI research, for other forms of machine learning work, for data science work. It's just absorbed all of the spare capacity in terms of compute, in terms of mental processing, in terms of money. And I don't think that's a great thing. I think that there's a major downside to it. But all of that said, I'm not going to sit here and say do not use Fabric Copilot. Not, I won't say that on principle. I might say it on I don't know how valuable and I guess I should clarify which Fabric Copilot, because there are like 7 or 8 of them. So some of them do a better job at performing specific tasks than others. Some of them are pretty solid. Some of them are half baked at best. But all of them are going to use up that compute capacity that you're purchasing. And if you're used to an F8 because you've scaled it out and it works well in your dev environment, and you're pushing kind of close to the limit, as soon as you start writing Copilot queries, that's going to hit. Those with the most CPUs win. That's generally life. I agree, Anders. It's mostly devs chomping at the bit for AI. It makes their jobs easier. We can't allow it until Purview and Microsoft AI DSPM, along with scoping and labeling, are completed. I sigh because that is a common story. And just tying back into Fabric, one of the things that I was kind of surprised to hear as I was talking to people, hearing conversations about Microsoft Fabric, just how many companies look at what's in Fabric and say, well, I'm not going to use it until it's generally available. I'm not going to use a preview feature. And in fairness, Microsoft tells you don't use preview features in production. But then on the other side, they say, well, we're not going to put something into production as GA until we have a lot of telemetry on it as a preview feature. So there's sort of a catch-22 here of, well, how is it going to go into production if you're telling us not to use it in production, and companies don't want to use it in production because you're telling them not to use it because you're saying it's a preview. And so there are dozens of items in public that are still in preview. And a lot of companies are like, well, I can't use that until it's GA. The problem is if you only focus on what's in Fabric and GA, as of, let's say, 2 weeks ago, that's a rough story. Now, as you can see from Patrick's blog post, there's a lot in here. And quite a bit of this was stuff that was in preview that went GA. It sounds like a genius technique. Yeah, it's definitely a catch-22. It's just kind of funny the way that they've gotten themselves locked in on this. And the problem, I blame Google for this. I blame Google because Gmail was in beta for 16 years and nobody cared. Most of their products are perpetually in beta. And other companies have taken that and like, oh, well, this is an software as a service product. Do I ever need to be GA? I could just be a preview forever or a beta forever, and yeah, nobody's going to care. It'll work fine. And I think Google really pushed that mindset a lot of push out new product and old product can sit, and maybe old product will become GA one of these years. I mean, like, seriously, Gmail took something like 16 years to become generally available before it was out of beta. Now, that didn't stop people from using Gmail and relying on Gmail, but for other things like what's in Fabric, the difference is during beta, I don't think Google ever said, you really don't want to use Gmail for any sort of production purposes or for your primary email. They just called it a beta and went on their day. When you call it a beta, you constantly have an excuse to not get around fixing anything if you don't feel like it. That cynically, a little bit, yeah. And you also have the ability to drop product support. I mean, I see the idea. I see the benefit here of, hey, let's put it in public preview. Let's see if it shakes out, if people adopt it, if people enjoy it, and if there's no traction at all, fine, pull it out. Pretend it doesn't exist. Never existed. Don't know what you're talking about. And so I can understand the concept there, but you can't at the same time say, well, we want you to use this, but we don't recommend that you use this. And that's the problem that I see. So I'm hopeful that over time, many of these public preview features become GA, and that as new features become public preview in Fabric, they move to GA a lot more rapidly. That it doesn't take them 6 months or 12 months before they go to GA. And I guess we'll see. But just very briefly going through some of the list items in here. Fabric did have quite a bit of updates around CI/CD, and this is something that people have been complaining about literally for a decade. I mean, Power BI has been out for a decade. People have been complaining about CI/CD and Power BI for a decade. With Fabric, the story is basically the same. Hey, what are you expecting to do about source control? Oh, well, we'll let you check in some of your items into source control. Okay, but what about the rest? Forthcoming. All right, what about deployments? You have certain deployment strategies available. Okay, but what about this technique? Forthcoming. And so understanding that this is a fairly new product overall and that there are a lot of working parts involved in this, and part of it is extricating from themselves from the mess that they created because they needed to bootstrap themselves into a working system with Power BI originally. And that working system had no concept of source control. Basically, having to paint their way out of that corner is a little bit tough. Now, I have been monopolizing the entire time, so I do want to open up, see if Mike or Mala, if you've got anything you wanted to add to this.
I would say I'm excited to learn Fabric because that's kind of where we're going at Duke. So that's on my list. So it's good to know all these limitations and have a nice overview like this. But I haven't personally used it yet.
I haven't used it at all, so I'm kind of clueless and just listening in and picking up little stuff. That's all. I'm not used it, and there's no plan to use it where we work. So
Yeah, and that's a pretty common thing.
yeah,
There's been a good amount of pickup with Fabric, but
I hear the rant on generative AI, and I think I agree with you based on what little I know about it.
yeah, and
That makes sense. Yeah.
sure, and so a lot of that just comes down to there's only so much compute to go around, and they keep adding more things like Fabric SQL database. So okay, here's a SQL database that is more for transactional processing in Fabric, which okay, I mean, it took a while for me to understand the actual value of it. And I suppose most of the actual value of it boils down to I don't want to manage things in the Azure portal. Um, or I want to more easily link in what I have running in transactional system into the rest of my Fabric Lakehouse, so I can have like metadata tables and other techniques that were very common in data warehousing are very common in data warehousing. I guess I get that. There's a part of me that still would prefer just make the relationship with Azure SQL databases more transparent and easier versus have your own copy of the code base for Azure SQL database, call it Fabric SQL databases, and offer like 30% of the feature set. But okay, fine. But that's all going to cost additional compute. And so, uh, that compute that you're using for Fabric SQL database is compute that you can't use for Lakehouse work or Spark notebooks or warehouses or real-time intelligence or Copilot or Power BI or any of the other services that Fabric offers currently. So uh, it's fun to see, and from the Microsoft side, it's a positive. All right, we're offering a lot of good uses for this capacity. So if you want to use all of those good uses, yeah, you're going to have to pony up more cash. You can't just run production on an NF2. It's just not going to work that way. Though the challenge comes from the business side of how do I appropriately scale my capacities? How do I set that up? And also the fact that things like surge protection are not out yet. It's something that Microsoft announced. I think it was at Ignite last year that surge protection. Yeah, we're gonna prevent one noisy neighbor in your environment, one noisy user in your environment from taking down an entire capacity, which is good. That's going to be very useful, but it's not there yet, which means one very expensive Spark notebook can take down the entire capacity, or one person gone ham with Copilot could take down your entire capacity. And that's not a great strategy when it's really difficult to tell at any point in time. So, how much capacity are we using, and what does it look like? Am I close to my limits? And can I estimate what this is going to be? Can I get an idea of how much capacity this notebook is going to use? The answer is not really. Run it and see. Feels like Microsoft's promising everything to get use, but not delivering. Yeah, in fairness, this entire blog post is delivering. So a lot of stuff is coming up as, hey, this is generally available. This is now here. But what we're seeing is at a grand scale what we saw with Power BI. Something that co-podcaster on a different podcast, Eugene Meidinger, talks about a lot, and that is that Power BI really was, hey, we're going to build a BI engine based on the idea of 2-week iterative sprints and picking the top feedback and implementing it from users. And we're seeing something similar to this in Fabric, except that Fabric is an order of magnitude larger. And so you have so much more surface area. You have so many things. And Microsoft, I think, pushed this out 2 years before it was really baked. We've seen this is now 1 year of Fabric GA, and then there was like 6 months or so of Fabric in preview. In all honesty, if they had held on to it, kept it quiet, and then announced this Fabric as, hey, we're in public preview, and in 6 months we're going to be GA, I think people are a lot happier and with the end result. But it's taking a while, and there's a lot of development. There's a huge amount of effort, and trying to work with a dozen plus major systems to get all the pieces to fit together. So I understand the level of complexity in the problem, and I also understand where you're going, Anders, um, where hey, it feels like they're making a bunch of promises they can't, writing checks they can't cash, and I think the answer is they can cash them, but it's going to take a while. It's going to take probably a couple of years before they're where they said they were going to be when Fabric came out. Like, oh, here's the great idea. And actually, I stopped on this particular bit, not just because this is where I scrolled down to, but also because this was one of the key things that when they announced Microsoft Fabric, this was one of the groundbreaking, oh my gosh, I can't believe it types of efforts. And that was originally called One Security. And it was the idea that no matter what tool you're using, no matter what platform you're accessing this data off of, you have the same access, the same way, the same rules for your data, no matter what. The problem is, as they found out, that's not as easy as it sounds. And already it doesn't sound very easy. And today, it's not at all true. The access to data in a KQL database is not the same as accessing the same data in the lakehouse. It is not the same as accessing the same data in a warehouse. You can have 3 completely different access patterns and 3 completely different sets of rights and possibly access different sets of data depending on how your administrators have set it up. And so you don't have that single pane of security. Instead, it is a single security of pain. And so that's not great. You really don't want to invert those words like that. So we are seeing improvements, and now One Security was renamed to One Lake Security because it kind of became, oh well, yeah, that KQL database is different from your data in the lakehouse in One Lake. So, we may get to that. We might get to that, but I don't know. And so you can see row level security and column level security. Using T-SQL, table access can be restricted to only specific rows where the T-SQL statement is true. But then that doesn't follow in the same way with other access. And so it's still feeling disjointed. And I think they are making this more coherent, more consistent. And again, in 2 years, it's probably going to be fine. It's probably going to be pretty close to what they originally told us we were going to have very soon now, TM. The big question will be, in 2 years, can you shake off that first impression? Where a lot of companies looked at Fabric, a lot of consultants helped with Fabric proofs of concept, and basically customers said, this is not mature enough. This is not baked. There's so much that needs to happen before my company can rely on Microsoft Fabric for this. And we are seeing movement here, but it's hard to shake that first impression. If you want unnecessary video game example, pick something like, well, quite a few modern games, but Cyberpunk 2077, perfect example of it. When it came out, that game was awfully buggy. It was buggy to the point of a lot of people couldn't play it. A couple of years later, most of the bugs are fixed. It's actually a really fun game. But you still have a large block of people who will not play the game because they remember when it came out and, wow, this thing is really buggy. Like, I can't even play, so I returned to the game. Some of those people will come back and try it again and say, actually, it is a lot of fun. But there are a lot of people who are permanently off on it because it just wasn't good. And in the data world, you're going to find something very similar to that, if not more so, because I think data people tend to be very slow to change. Where, I don't want to upgrade to the newest version of the system because I don't trust it. This version that's been running for 5 years, at least I can trust that it's going to do the thing that I want it to do. And so if they try something, this this class of person tries something and it doesn't work out, well, we're not doing it. We're never going over to it. That's just forbidden. Even if a year later, you know, it turns out that no, this actually is fine. I must trust it. Yeah. See, Anders goes the other way. Anders is a trend breaker. There are a lot of people that remember their first experience or any negative experience, not willing to try anything else ever again. Exactly. I would imagine it's have something to do with the data engineers being the ones with the tickets. Yeah, and there are specifically to Fabric. Yeah, there are a lot of gaps when it comes to data engineering and pain points that people experience around it. When it comes to like database administrators, there were a lot of pain points around early releases of SQL Server 2022. And
Right.
so there are companies that will never go to 2022, even though, by the way, 2022 is the only version of SQL Server currently in mainstream support. Um, Despite that, they'll never use 2022 because, well, the first CUs were there were bugs, there were problems, and so that version is fully tainted, even though there have been dozens of CUs. So the idea is basically, if you lose the first impression, it can be very hard with a lot of people to get that back. And I guess we'll see with Fabric. Um, Maybe in a couple of years, some people will say, "Okay, it's time to reevaluate." Maybe you'll have different people coming in and helping that reevaluation. But I imagine that there's probably some percentage of the market that's just permanently closed off because of this strategy. But unfortunately, there aren't too many other good strategies that are available. I mean, it's not like Microsoft can just sit there for 2 years and say, we are under active development. We're going to spend all of this money developing, but we're not going to show you any product. We're not going to make it available or try to sell it to anybody, because that's a lot of money getting spent on a big data risk or a big risk involving the data platform. So they can't develop it in secret and then release it fully formed out of the head of Zeus in 2027. That was never going to be in the cards. And so the issue is it's not my issue, it's their issue. But how do you manage expectations or try to bring back some people you've burned with the way you had to handle this? And that's the tightrope that they need to walk.
Kevin, so I have a question.
Go for it.
Um, do you have anything to say on the line that many people had, at least what I heard at the past summit, that SQL Server is getting much less love now? The focus is almost entirely on AI and this fabric thing. Is that really true in your opinion, or
Yeah, sticking to my opinion only. My
yeah?
opinion is one man yelling into the ether. Probably. If you look at what development teams are around and what development teams are doing things, there are a lot of developers, a lot of people working on co-pilots in Microsoft. Basically, every product has to have a co-pilot,
Uh-huh.
regardless of how useful or not it is.
Mm-hmm.
There is a lot of money. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
Microsoft has over the past couple of years thrown tens of billions of dollars at OpenAI.
Mm-hmm.
They've given away at very low cost a whole bunch of compute hours and credits and for Azure to OpenAI.
Mm-hmm.
So they have absolutely spent a lot of money in that area. And when
Mm-hmm.
it comes to development around products, like again, this is 1 month's release for the Fabric blog, and I'm scrolling down. These are still more things. Patrick wrote a lot,
Mm-hmm.
so all of these things, these are, I don't know, maybe a dozen product teams working on this.
Mm-hmm.
I can guarantee you there aren't a dozen product teams working on SQL Server on premises.
Mm-hmm. Not
There
even
are,
on including as a, yeah.
Yeah. Now, even including Azure, like the Azure SQL database folks and the managed instance and stuff that goes into the box product, there may be. I mean, okay, I don't want to make it sound like, oh, there's nobody working on this. There obviously are people working on this. We see new features. We see new things coming out
Mm-hmm.
in Azure SQL DB. We have the list of what Bob Ward has said. Hey, this is going to be in SQL Server 2025.
Mm-hmm.
So we know that these things are making their way through. However, this is not 2008, where Microsoft's major financial play is trying to acquire new companies in the relational database space.
Mm-hmm.
I think where they're seeing it is SQL Server is already saturated in a market. There
Mm-hmm.
aren't an enormous number of companies that are going to say, oh, okay, we need to go buy SQL Server.
Mm-hmm.
There are an enormous number of companies using SQL Server, and we do see things still happening in SQL Server. So it's by no means is it dead.
Mm-hmm.
But Fabric is where the new money is. And
Mm-hmm.
so for that reason, we see a lot getting pushed down that way.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so looking up at comments here. Microsoft all Copilot everywhere all the time. Unfortunately, yeah, that seems to be the mission. There are a lot of non-technical people who are excited and throwing money at AI things. So that's where the money is. And technical people who know better will still go play with that stuff because there's a lot of money. You're absolutely right. Until the money dries up, yeah. I mean, from the standpoint of a self-interested agent, I look at that and say, sweet, give me money. I too would like to have money. From the standpoint of somebody who wants to look at gradual improvement overall, I say this looks like a horrible misallocation of resources and will eventually pop, and then hopefully some of those resources will get reallocated to better uses. So um, the causes, we can get into it another day, but I won't dive into that too much, because even though Boombavak is my homeboy, we don't need to talk about him today. Not on Shop Talk. All right. Taking a major toll on the quality of everything else. Yeah, yes, everybody who has to work on Copilot for Microsoft Teams is not working on making Microsoft Teams more usable. Copilot for PowerPoint is not working on fixing bugs in PowerPoint. Copilot for SSMS, not making SSMS more feature rich. Copilot for Azure Data
Yeah.
Studio is just that's just hurtful. I can't believe I even said that out loud.
I wonder if you could ask it what the current bugs are. I'll do it right now.
Sorry, Mike, what was that?
I was thinking, what if you could ask the Copilot what the current bugs are in each of the softwares? That'd be funny. What are
Yes.
the current
Okay,
bugs?
so while Mike does independent research there, let's continue with the comments. Does this mean that Microsoft Bob has Copilot? There is absolutely a Melinda Gates joke in there. I'm not making the Melinda Gates joke. I'm leaving that for you, the degenerates in the audience.
It does tell you.
Well, there you go. So Mike's learning new things every day. There's a Copilot for Notepad. You know,
What?
if I didn't know that you were joking,
No, it isn't. Is
I
it?
wouldn't know that you were joking. I want to see Clippy piloting Reaper drones for Bitcoin, or it's all a wash. I kind of like this world. I like this world that you're going for. You've definitely got some of the dystopia elements down, and I wish to subscribe to your Shadowrun exploits. All right, SQL 2025, aka SQL 2022 AI edition. Hopefully not. I can remember MS Bob even had it installed on a machine at one point to see what absurdity they had. I can be pretty confident it was not an officially licensed copy, though. All right, so if anybody's paying attention, the statute of limitations has expired on that. And by the way, Microsoft Bob, for the youngins in the audience, the folks who have never used it, Microsoft Bob was Microsoft's attempt to uh, create really a very user-friendly experience for computing for the the grandpa type who has never used a computer before but understands the metaphor of a file drawer. So instead of showing like Windows Explorer, you have the file cabinet. You can open up the file cabinet and pull out your files. And so that was kind of the intent. And actually, in fairness to Microsoft around that time, I remember Sony had their user experience that sat on top of Windows and was trying to do something of the same thing. We were right in that first wave of virtual reality on the monitor and uh, attempting to make use of it. VRML was hot language of the mid 90s. And so, I kind of understood the idea. Bob was a complete flop, though, except I was not joking. The product manager in charge of Microsoft Bob was the future Melinda Gates. That was back before she got married, but she certainly won in developing Bob. All right. Maybe not a lot of new companies, but you sure could stop a lot of Postgres adoption. Sure. And I mean, I will say there are a lot of things that I want to see in SQL Server. I would not consider this a done product in the sense of, well, we've done everything that we possibly could. There is nothing new that we can adopt. And I kind of wish I could push some buttons and get higher priority for some of the things that I like. Although, given my track record on liking things, that's probably more of a kiss of death. So maybe it's for the best that I have no say over what comes out. I'm completely ignorant on the difference between SQL Server, Databricks, and Fabric. Can we have a 60-second breakdown of problem sets? Yes, that is exactly what we're best here at on Shop Talk. That is blithe oversimplifications of complex problems with a smile. Mike and Mala have to do the smile. I'm legally obligated not to smile. But SQL Server, Databricks, Fabric. 2.5 different stories. SQL Server is a enterprise relational database management system. This solves two major problems: online transactional processing, online analytical processing. Online transactional processing is your accounting systems. It is your ERPs, enterprise resource planning systems. It is maybe your customer relationship management system. It is your mainline systems that do a lot of writing, do a fair amount of reading, and need to be correct. Because if they're not correct, if you don't need your data to be correct, you can just use MongoDB or something. But when you need it to be correct, you should use a relational database. That's OLTP. OLAP, analytical processing, is warehousing. This is where I'm not going to do a lot of writing necessarily, but I'm going to do a lot of reading, and I want to simplify those reads to the point where a business user could conceivably write queries. The major downside to transactional processing systems, if you have designed them well, is that they are not trivial for business users to understand how to write a query. Oh my gosh, I have to write 12 joins. I don't understand how this works. And in fairness, if you're a novice SQL user or just don't understand the language, yeah, that is a challenge. But there's a reason for the design the way that it is. For an analytical processing system, we try to simplify that a lot. We try to create following certain patterns. You may hear something called a star schema, but that's just a way of laying out data in such a way that is simple for business people to understand and is easy. It's easy to query conceptually, and it's easy to manage historical data. So those are the two classic problems, OLTP and OLAP. Now, as data sizes grow, as needs expand, we've seen the growth of, well, yeah, it's okay that you load a warehouse once a day, but I'd really like that data in once an hour or once a minute or as near to real time as you can give me. And so we see more pressures on those warehouses. And yeah, it's okay that you had a 10 terabyte warehouse, but now I want 100 terabytes or a petabyte. I have much more data that I need to funnel through. And so we've ended up in a more complex situation where I'm spending more time on data processing. I'm spending more time on trying to shuffle data between systems and translating from that transactional processing system and the architectural design that works well for it versus the analytical system and the architectural design that works for it. And one of the ultimate results of this is the growth of products like Databricks. Without getting too deep into the weeds, we have the ability to distribute compute in Databricks. So I can have multiple machines working on this data transformation, this data storage, and this data retrieval. Multiple machines working on a problem is something that historically has been very difficult to do with relational databases. It is technically possible, but it is a serious challenge. And Databricks and its underlying Spark engine made that challenge a lot easier. So you were able to scale out your demand or your supply of compute, I guess I should say, to meet the increased demand and demands of your customers. So Databricks comes in and serves as they call it a modern data warehouse, where you're taking that data and you're storing it maybe in a data lake as a series of files, as a series of, say, columnar storage files in Parquet format. And then you're performing analytical queries off of that data. Microsoft Fabric is coming in and trying to fit much of the same system, the same process as Databricks, as well as some of the analytical stuff on premises and maybe a tiny bit of transactional with Fabric SQL databases. So the idea here with Fabric is you still have your source systems. They're still going to be relational databases for the most part. They're going to feed data in, and you may also get data from other sources as well. You may have real-time events that come in that you have to handle through an event hub or something. And you're going to want to process this data, reshape it in a way that makes sense for analytics, store that data, and then be able to query it and visualize it. So this is where Fabric fits in. Fabric and Databricks are competitors along several angles. Fabric and Snowflake are competitors along several angles. And all of them are attempting to be analytical engines for data processing as opposed to source system of record data storage. So that's your 60-second version of it in like 3 minutes. The tech world needs a new tech every 24 to 36 months to suck the VC people dry. The hype cycle says it needs to be faster than that. Or maybe what the hype cycle says is we have like 12 of them, and then one of them really goes blockchain on us.
That's good.
So Kendra Little had a blog post, about a month ago, talking about the decline of SQL Server quality and about some of the bugs and issues that have popped up in the product over the last little bit. Kendra has been on a rampage lately about issues in Azure SQL Managed Instance, especially, and about the lack of quality response that she has gotten from Microsoft in that regard. And being a former Microsoftie, she pulls no punches. So it has been good to read her blog to stay up to date on what's happening there. Copilot for Copilot. Yes, but you're also banned. All right, Anders is not joking, which I don't believe. Although that was about Notepad, Copilot for Notepad, which I also don't believe, even though
I actually just used
I
it.
knew he wasn't joking at all. I mean, we heard of that even at the summit that Copilot is going to be everywhere.
So the options are you have to turn it on in Notepad, It's rewrite, summarize, make shorter, make longer, change tone, or change format. Those are your options. And I spelled hello wrong, and then I said rewrite it, and it spelled it right.
I hate to say, but I'd rather pay for Grammarly. I have a Grammarly subscription. I don't need to.
I've heard Grammarly is excellent.
Oh, it's excellent, and it doesn't. It's not annoying or anything like that. I've just loved it. I'll continue to pay for it.
Yeah. I had the free version of Grammarly for a while. So
Yeah.
again, I hate this timeline. I kind of wish we were on Enhanced QC's timeline involving Clippy and drones and Bitcoin. I think that one, while being also awful, would at least be more entertaining. Microsoft Bob predates Windows 95 by a few months. Oh, so it was off of 3.11. Okay, I guess it was early 95 that Bob came out. SQL for data entry, Databricks for business intelligence, Fabric for it's SQL Server, data entry, and I don't want to sell it short. You can absolutely do really great analytics off of SQL Server. Databricks, business intelligence, you can use it for machine learning. You can use it for, again, analytics. Fabric, business intelligence, machine learning, analytics. The important thing to note is Databricks is a totally separate company from Microsoft. They have sort of a frenemy relationship with Microsoft where Microsoft salespeople will push you to use Databricks, and Databricks salespeople technically are supposed to push you to use Azure. It is a first-party relationship, but they are still separate companies that have different salespeople, marketing chains, and are competitive when it comes to Fabric versus Databricks. Microsoft owns Minecraft. Yeah, they paid a lot of money for Minecraft. And a co-pilot for Minecraft. Auto clicker. All right. Different versions of trying to scale or make all the data closer and closer to real time. This has been, that's been a pretty common theme over the past several years, is the two realms of I need to be able to process more data, and also I need to be able to process the data that I have faster. And those two things led to most of what we saw in the, using scare quotes, big data movement, where Hadoop, which which then led to Spark, to Kafka, to a variety of patterns like the Lambda and Kappa architectures, and really this notion of I have to be able to process enormous amounts of data that may not fit on one single machine, or at least not economically able to fit on a single machine. But I also cannot wait 24 hours for this query to run because the business people will hang me. And as a result, you saw these patterns emerge. You saw the concept of a data lake, where instead of having all of your data in storage accessible to a single machine and locked by a single machine, and where parallelism is different cores on your single machine are able to access it, you have this notion of distributed storage where it can be on multiple hosts. You have the ability to access it concurrently from different machines. But then those different machines you don't really want them talking to each other because you don't want extra dependencies to come into play. So as a result, you have to come up with algorithms that allow machines to work independently in solving parts of the problem and then coming together at the very end to come up with your end solution. So that's why the patterns exist the way they do for things like Spark, even if I would say by far the most common use case of a Databricks notebook or a Fabric notebook that uses the Spark engine is for a single machine, a single node, or maybe two nodes to do work. You don't typically have your 400 node Spark clusters, even though it is technically possible. All right, last thing for tonight. One last thing, just because Mala wanted me to rub this in. Oracle finally admits to the data breach that they claimed for, I think it was like a year. No, there was no data breach. What are you talking about? No data breach ever happened. It turns out that, there actually was a data breach. But don't worry, just select customers. Just select like all customers. But 6 million Oracle customer records. So Oracle originally dismissed this, saying that their cloud systems were uncompromised. But the problem is that the data sets that were available included usernames, SSO, and LDAP credentials, Java key store files, and Enterprise Manager JPS keys, which were hosted in Oracle Cloud. But hey, it was a legacy environment that's not used in active services. And some of the
Sure, the
stolen
people aren't
credentials.
legacy. Some of the people aren't legacy.
Yeah. How is this possible? Nobody used legacy Oracle Cloud. Wild guess. They probably took their customer base from somewhere else and put it in there as, oh, we'll assume that everybody's going to be in our cloud. So Gen 1 cloud infrastructure, basically big problems, known Java vulnerability, and there was a ransom demand in early March. But don't worry, there was no data breach. I don't know what you're talking about. So anyhow, you can read the whole story. There's not a lot more to it other than just a little bit of schadenfreude. So we're going to end the show on that note of schadenfreude, and it is, after all, 7 o'clock Eastern time. So with that, we're going to wrap up for the evening. Quick note, tomorrow, it's already the second Tuesday of the month. So tomorrow we have, and I'm going to go grab the URL, but I'm just going to meetup.com/trypass, where you can see all of our upcoming events. Tomorrow we have regular expressions in SQL Server and Azure SQL DB. One of those things that will be in SQL Server 2025. And this is Yitzhak David, who's going to talk to us. And it's going to be pretty late for him in Israel. So come check that out. It'll be late for him. It won't be late for us. It's 6 p.m. Eastern time tomorrow. And then next Tuesday, we're going to have Thomas Grosser, who is in town for just a little bit. He's in the U.S. for a little while, in from Austria, and he will talk to us about backup and restore, from strategy to implementation. That's going to be our in-person event, so definitely come out and see TG. And fourth Tuesday, I am going to talk about DuckDB. So it's getting started with DuckDB. We'll talk about what it is, why it is, and why you might want to use it.
Definitely interested.
All that we've got. So with that, everybody, we're going to wind things down for tonight. Hopefully we'll see you at one of these future meetings. And until we do, take care.
Bye.